the start of the European season, and rather appropriately, this is the European Grand Prix. Round 4 of the 2014 FF1M Championship comes to you from the Nürburgring circuit. A circuit that once thought it was in Luxembourg, but it's actually in Germany, somewhere in the Eifel region. And we'll talk about the previous race in China because we saw a thrilling race between 3 expected championship contenders, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, and then the eventual race winner, Sebastian Vettel, who had a very good race to jump Fernando Alonso after the first round of pit stops, but only after Alonso first had an incident with Jenson Button at the final corner, and then the unlucky Spaniard had a massive engine failure, which is certainly not doing his championship any good. It's his teammate who leads at the moment, Nico Rosberg, on 26 points, 1 point ahead of Lewis Hamilton, Gajera Autosports, Lewis Hamilton, and then Sebastian Vettel sits third on 20 points. And he'll get a chance to shine at his first home race of the season. Here's a look at the circuit. We're using the Prix 2002 spec Nürburgring at 4.556 kilometers per lap and 66 laps, or 67 depending on what comes up at the top of the screen, and 2 stops expected for the whole field. Just having a look at the practice sessions, we saw Lewis Hamilton top the first one for Gajera, Alonso and Vettel second and third, so they're the 3 championship contenders, 3 of the 4 championship contenders because Stoffel van Dorn took over Nico Rosberg's spot. Hamilton once again topped second practice. He was joined by the top 3 by Romain Grosjean in the Pedersen and Jenson Button in the FJR. A driver who hasn't scored a point yet. That's very concerning for the Yorkshire team, but he's had a much better qualifying this time around. The top 3, the usual 3 from the previous 3 races, it's Hamilton on pole this time from Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel. Button sits 4th. Very unusual to see an FJR this high up, but I'll take it. Nico Rosberg starts 5th for the other Willows, not far ahead of Sergio Perez, who himself was only 4 thousandths quicker than Valtteri Bottas, one of the men of the season. Very impressive in the GRM. Romain Grosjean starts 8th on the grid in the improved Pedersen, and completing the top 10 are Kimi Raikkonen and Robert Kubica. And an improved performance as well from Adrian Sutil, who starts a season's best 12th for the Horizon. Jean-Eric Vergne starts 13th, so slightly better showing for himself in the Tornado. Not quite as good from Nico Hülkenberg, however. He's starting 14th in his first home race of the season. And just having a look further back, Kamui Kobayashi 19th, 18 places behind his teammate and pole sitter Lewis Hamilton. And no Tornadoes on the back row this time. They are instead occupied by Spanish-speaking drivers of Jaime Alguersuari and Pastor Maldonado for Mitchell and Pedersen, respectively. So, 5 lights are on, 66 laps of the Nürburgring, and 5 lights go out. And it looked as if it was a good start for Lewis Hamilton, but Alonso's got a good second phase. Let's see what he can do going into the first corner. Jenson Button is up into 3rd already, but Sergio Perez up into 4th. And Alonso has taken the lead. That was round the outside of the first corner. And further back, all drivers have got through the Castrol S very safely, but it's Fernando Alonso who leads from Lewis Hamilton. 2 championship contenders, and they've already begun their battle. Now then, we see Sergio Perez in 3rd position, Jenson Button all of the back, and there's Sebastian Vettel, who's under pressure from Romain Grosjean going into the Dunlop hairpin, but hangs on to 5th position, so not a great start for Vettel. And a good start for Grosjean, up 2 places, not good for Rosberg, down 2. Now then, we see Lewis Hamilton all over the back of Alonso, and Button's all over the back of Perez as well. As we go on board with the man who sits 2nd in the championship at the moment, just 1 point behind Rosberg, who currently sits 7th, but it's Alonso who leads, and there's nearly contact between the 2. Hamilton just about avoiding contact, but missing as the front wing has gone from somebody who has lost part of the front wing. I think it's Nico Hülkenberg, and into the pits comes him, and look at that, the Tornado wheelies into the pit lane. I've never seen that before. Is that Jean-Eric Vergne? It is Jean-Eric Vergne, who mistakenly thought his Tornado was a monster truck. Now then, what have we got? Sergio Perez, who's pulled out quite a bit of a gap over Button. As we go through the second lap, I think Button might have had a go at Perez, but dropped back a bit, as the same as Lewis Hamilton. So there is confirmation of Verne in the pits, and Hulkenberg. So hopefully we'll get to see a replay of what happens, but it's definitely Hulkenberg's front wing that went astray, possibly Verne's as well. So I wonder who they hit. So Rosberg in 6th position now. He's gained a place on Grosjean during that first lap. Now he's going to be all over the back of Vettel as we go through the bit curve. I can remember these corner names this time. Here is Alonso, who's edging out a bit of a gap now over Hamilton. On the mediums is Alonso, Hamilton on hards, and Rosberg versus Vettel into the VDOL or NGK chicane, whichever you prefer to call it. There's a lock-up from Suttil, who gained a position over Ricciardo at the start, and look at that, Magnussen, and here's Raikkonen versus Grosjean. Contact between the two, and a wild spin for Raikkonen, who is completely spun round, and I think Ricciardo's had an incident he ran wide, and there's an Andrew F1 that's doing a donut. It's Felipe Massa, and Raikkonen probably beached himself, so it's Massa who hits Ricciardo. Ricciardo goes for a trip across the gravel, while Massa goes for a trip sideways. And we have a look at Rosberg versus Vettel, two Germans going at it into the NGK VDOL chicane. Let's call it VDOL, that's the one I remember the most. I think it probably changed to NGK at some point after 2001. And Magnussen into the pits very early, so has he sustained damage? No, it's an electrical problem, as indicated on his steering wheel. And turning around, he's gone off the track, he's having rejoined. Magnussen having a bit of a spin at the first part of the Ford chicane, and he's going to donut back round. FGRs have been a bit reliable at the start of the season, if not competitive. And so far, in round 4, it looks as if Magnussen's had a few problems. We're having a look at Valtteri Bottas versus Roman Grosjean, and the move didn't quite work out, and as a result, Bottas is now becoming under pressure from Robert Kubica in the Andrew F1. Kubica's got a good run going into the first corner, and contact between the two, and contact once again between the two, but neither driver losing position, only time, and now Kubica has got Suttil behind him, and that's Daniel Ricciardo, who is pretty much recovering from his off-track excursion and contact with Massa a couple of laps ago. Now we're having a look at Kamui Kobayashi versus Carlos Sainz. Kobayashi trying to make the move going into the first corner, and he's got that. 13th position for the Japanese driver, who certainly hasn't been on the pace of his teammate throughout the season. And we're having a look, is this Rosberg or Alonso? It's Alonso, and has Alonso got an issue? His pit indicator's on. He has indeed. Alonso's lost the lead to Lewis Hamilton. So what has happened to the Spaniard? Yet more bad luck and unreliability. Can he make it back into the pits? It's an electrical problem, as indicated on his steering wheel, so I imagine they're just going to change the wheel and send him on his merry way. This is going to move Sergio Perez up into 2nd position. And we're looking at Jenson Button. This is Perez, who's going to take 2nd from Alonso. Alonso choosing to defend somewhat. I wouldn't have recommended that. Now then, as Alonso's going to duck into the pits, this is going to put Jenson Button into 3rd position, and or is it? Because Button has now got Vettel all over his gearbox. Button delayed a bit at the chicane, and then Vettel in the slipstream of Button. Button's going to defend a bit, Vettel's going to go up the inside. But Button hanging on round the outside. No, he's not, he's ran a bit wide, and that's given Sebastian Vettel 3rd position on the road. Now then, the recovering Fernando Alonso through the Schumacher S. I'm going to call it the Schumacher S, because that is a much cooler name. Former world champion in FF1M is Michael Schumacher. Won it in 96 and 98. First time round, I think it was for Aquino Plus, and then the second time round was Dodgems, Drivers' Championship. It's up the inside of the chicane, but backing out of it is Fernando Alonso. Is he against Jaime Alguersuari? I think so, as we go around the Coca-Cola curve. And just behind Alonso is that Kimi Raikkonen? I think it is. Now then, here's Lewis Hamilton coming out of the pit curve, and he's indicating a pit stop quite early as well. Has he got a problem? Certainly looks quite slow, going up to the Vidal chicane. That's very slow. So we're going to see another new leader in the form of Sergio Perez. So into the pit lane comes the Gajera. Indeed it is, yet another electrical, but it could be... it's showing brake problem instead. So conflicting information on the steering wheel, but we are getting confirmation from the Gajera pit crew that there is an issue with the brakes. Nothing but a quick pit stop will fix that. And taking on a lot of fuel, he's going to bring his first scheduled stop early. 34 laps. That should take him to about lap 40, mid-40s. That's going to be a long middle stint, rejoining in 12th position as Sergio Perez now leads the race from Sebastian Vettel. Jenson Button sits third ahead of Nico Rosberg, so much better showing from FJR this time around as we have a look at Mitchell getting up the inside of Kimi Raikkonen. It must be in the other Exolite because Sergio Perez is leading. Hulkenberg versus Raikkonen. What happened to Kimi? I'm trying to remember what happened. Oh yeah, he had that incident at the first chicane with Grosjean. And here comes another one. Raikkonen tagging the back of Hulkenberg. Hulkenberg going off the track. Just about being kissed up the arse by the Tornado. But once again, Kimi Raikkonen losing out. And here's another recovering driver. It is Fernando Alonso, who is trying to challenge Felipe Massa up the inside into the chicane. And that is going to be a position for Alonso, is it? Because that's a very strange line coming out of it. And Massa retakes the position. So these two battling away quite nicely. No contact so far. But let's see what happens as they go side by side on the main straight into the Castrol S. Fairly even in terms of straight line speed. And here is third place Jenson Button, who's quite close behind Vettel. Look at that. The top 7 separated by just 8.6 seconds. So it's a very close race at this moment. Between Perez, Vettel, this man Button, Nico Rosberg in 4th position, soon to be 3rd because into the pits comes the FJR of Button, looking for his first points of the season. Now then, I should have mentioned at the start of the season that manufacturer teams can run higher engine modes in the race. This is a feature that isn't available for customer teams, but at the expense of reliability. Now we've seen Alonso and Hamilton suffer some reliability issues, both manufacturer teams. So I wonder if they've turned up the engines for this race, because we've seen very good reliability in the new engine era. So out the pits comes Button. At the moment not in the top 8, he's 10th. So let's see where his second stint, how his second stint works, as into the pits comes Hulkenberg. So Button was the first one to stop. Perez going through for another lap, as is Vettel. So let's see what happens between new tyres and low fuel load. But Vettel's definitely closing in on the Mexican Perez. Nico Rosberg sits 2.9 seconds behind Sergio, or Checo, depending on which he prefers. I think he's fine with either name. As into the pits comes Bottas and Ricciardo from 4th and 5th. Let's see if we get any clues. Sutill's also in the pits. Everyone looking to make 2 stops. Kobayashi coming into the pits. I suspect most teams might well have, or the manufacturer teams might have turned their engines up if we're seeing early reliability issues. We saw Magnussen have a reliability issue very early on as well. And you're just going to have to make your own assumptions as to what engine modes I'm running. Apologies. So Vettel getting a sniff of a slipstream now off the back of the Exolite in the customer Exolite Ilmor engine. versus the manufacturer Megatron engine. Neither pitting yet. Both must be running on fumes at this point. Now, is Rosberg going to make his first pit stop? No, he is not. He's going to continue for another lap. Now, I'm going to keep an eye on the gaps between Button and Perez, because it was about 26.1 seconds as they started this previous lap. Now on lap 22, 1/3 distance, Perez holds a 6/10 lead over Vettel, a 2.7 second lead over Rosberg. Di Resta's up in 4th position for the Horizon, but dropping behind Hamilton because Di Resta, I suspect, is making a pit stop. Indeed he is, as that comes up on the monitor. Rounding the Dunlop hairpin comes Perez and Vettel, and Rosberg closing in as well. Button 27 seconds behind Perez. So I don't think Button's going to jump these two when they make their pit stop, but Vettel is due in the pits this lap, so it'll be interesting to see. Vettel on mediums, Perez on hards, Button also on hards, which is different from his teammate, who I believe is on mediums. I should know, I did the testing programme. Sainz currently runs in 7th, ahead of Bottas. I suspect Sainz has a pit stop to make. As into the pits comes Vettel and Rosberg, but Perez continues for another lap. I'm not sure if Perez did something similar, actually, in the previous season's race, because he started on pole position but finished outside the points. So I wonder if new tyres are indeed the big factor. Into his pit box, a new set of yellow-walled medium tyres for the shake and bake, and 5.3 seconds. That is a quick stop. 2.2 seconds quicker than FJR of Button. That's Hamilton coming into the picture. Now, he made that early pit stop, and contact between Vettel and Hamilton again. Not the first time that's happened this season. So, Vettel has rejoined fairly comfortably ahead of Button, and crucially ahead of Hamilton. Now, this is Vettel's time to put in a very good outlap, because no doubt Perez will be due in the pits either this lap or maybe the next one. Let's see, lap 23. It is still Perez who has a pit stop to make from Vettel, and Hamilton will sit 3rd at this moment. But will both or either of these two, or none of them, in fact, don't forget that could happen if Perez puts in a good in-lap. As they exit the bit curve, there's Vettel, Hamilton and Rosberg, 3 championship leaders, and it was just 1 lap longer than Vettel that Perez did, running his fuel to the limit. And that's a slower stop, 6.5 seconds. Vettel was only 6/10 behind before making his pit stop. Keep an eye on the left-hand side of the screen as Perez trundles down the pit lane at 81 kilometres an hour. There's Vettel and there's Hamilton. And is Perez going to rejoin ahead or behind? Behind Vettel, but ahead of Hamilton. That's crucial. So now Perez can use 1 lap younger tyres to set off after Vettel. And there's just behind is Hamilton, and there's Rosberg, and there's Button as well. 3.5 seconds covering the top 5. And Grosjean having another strong race, who's currently only 6 seconds behind Vettel. Very, very close field. I'm enjoying this. Perez won't be enjoying Hamilton all over his gearbox. But Hamilton is on much older tyres, at least 12 laps older than Perez in front of him. As Kevin Magnussen makes his first scheduled stop, he's having a pretty dismal race. 22nd position at the moment. So all cars still running at this point as Hamilton sees a very, very swervy and wide Exolite in front of him under braking for the Vidal chicane. Now he's going to get an opportunity coming down of the Coca-Cola curve. Onto the start-finish straight. Perez just weaving a little bit, trying to break the slipstream, but Hamilton's not having much of it. The inside into turn 1, the Castrol S, and Perez hanging on round the outside. And now Hamilton has lost momentum, and now he's going to become under pressure from Rosberg. No chance going into the Ford chicane as Fernando Alonso makes his first scheduled stop. So he didn't do what Hamilton did when he had his mechanical issue. Now then we've got Rosberg, who I was half wondering whether he was going to have a look going into the Dunlop hairpin, but nothing of it. Rosberg saw that Hamilton was in the middle of the circuit, so backed out of it a little bit, which is wise. And once again, Hamilton taking a middle line before sweeping to the outside for the corner before the bit curve, which we're at now onto the back straight, and to the flat-out right kink, Hatson back bogan, I think it's called. And nearly contact. There is contact between Hamilton and Rosberg going into the Vidal chicane. Just a friendly little love tap. Now coming out of the Coca-Cola curve. Now Button is up the back of Rosberg. Let's see if Jensen can do anything about this. Ooh, that was very, very close going into the Castrol S. And now Button is going to come under pressure from Grosjean in the rejuvenated Pedersen. Sponsored by Smirnoff. Out of the race goes Sebastian Buemi. So I think he becomes the first retirement. That's obviously mechanical. A gearbox or drive shaft problem for the Tornado. And just at that moment, Magnussen takes 21st. So as the Marshal clears the Tornado out of the way, who's running on the hard tyres, we have a look at Fernando Alonso, who is all over the back of Maldonado. Through the bit curve he goes. This is a battle for 14th position. Now what's Alonso going to do going into the Vidal chicane? Keeping it cautious through Hatzenbach-Bogen. Or Boden. I might look that up at some point. But that's 14th position for Alonso, and now Maldonado has got a Mitchell all over his back. Is that Alguersuari or Hulkenberg? It's Hulkenberg, who challenges for 15th position into the Castrol S. Maldonado hanging on round the outside once again. Seen that quite a few times in this race. Oh, Paul Di Resta out. That is out of the race for the Horizon. That's a shame. He briefly ran up in 4th before his first stop. Once again, the gearbox or drive shaft somewhere in the transmission has gone a bit wonky for the Horizon. Brief look at Magnussen before Hulkenberg takes 14th position off of Maldonado. Now Maldonado has got Felipe Massa to contend with. Approaching half distance now, it is Sebastian Vettel who leads from Sergio Perez, and contact between the two South American drivers. Massa goes for a spin, and he's going to drop down the order. There's the other Mitchell going past of Alguersuari, and there's Kimi Räikkönen, who's having an awful race. Down in 18th position while his teammate sits 2nd. So here's Fernando Alonso. This is Spaniard on Spaniard going into the Vidal chicane. And the two Spaniards have a little kiss. And Alonso spins, and that's a front wing gone for both Alonso and Hulkenberg. So both are going to have to come into the pits. Alonso's race goes from bad to worse. Well, it was already worse. Now it's just gone even worse than that. As he dutifully follows the Mitchell. We're looking at Hamilton now. He's 7.8 seconds now behind Vettel, who's looking fairly comfortable now. Comfortable-ish, because he sits 4.2 seconds ahead of Perez, who's having a storming drive in the Axelite. Where did Perez start? That was 6th position on the grid. Good start. And so far, his car has been fairly reliable. So Hamilton during the pits this lap only got 8/10 over Nico Rosberg. So it'll be interesting to see what these two drivers do. There's Button in the background coming through, and it's spacing out a bit now, because at the start of this middle stint there were about 6 seconds between Vettel and Grosjean. Now that's gone up to 14.3 seconds. So this middle stint proving to be a bit of a spacer. As into the pits for his second stop comes Lewis Hamilton. He'll be thankful for some new tyres, because his first stop was on lap 11 after an electrical problem or brake problem. It was a brake problem as not indicated on his steering wheel. And that was a very, very good stop. 4.8 seconds. That will do his chances of staying ahead of Rosberg much good. As that was Suttle coming through. And is that Hamilton's teammate? Hard to see from this angle. It is Hamilton's teammate, who is behind Hamilton himself. Hamilton 10th, so That explains Suttle is in 9th at the moment. Now what we're looking at here, Sebastian Vettel, who is being balked by Jean-Eric Vergne, who's making a pit stop. And that is a lapped Alonso behind him. So not under threat from Alonso at the moment, but if Hamilton can put in some good laps, then he could do something about Vettel at this point. Where's Sergio Perez? There he is, coming through the Dunlop hairpin. So Vettel losing a bit of time on his in-lap. That could be crucial. Will it be crucial, though? I'll tell you what, it will be if Fernando Alonso does something about it. Alonso on new tyres compared to the shake and bake. Vettel desperate from some slipstream of Vergne as yellow flags out, so something has happened at the chicane. It's Kobayashi who's had something of an incident. And look at that, being helped back round by Alonso. Very courteous. And into the pits comes Vettel. So he's just about managed to avoid that. A blessing in disguise. So what happened? It was Kobayashi versus Sainz. Contact, and that sent Kobayashi spinning. I don't know how he ended up on the inside of the circuit. I think he tried to rejoin, but made a porridge of it. So into his pit box comes Vettel. Third set of yellow-walled mediums go on. Rosberg also in the pits. Perez has stayed out, I think. I think he did that in his first stint as well. So, coming out of the pit lane, has Vettel lost enough time to be challenged by Hamilton? Not even slightly. That is decent. And Hamilton has jumped Rosberg in the second round of stops. There's Hamilton. Rosberg a long way back. So Hamilton has done a good job on his in-lap. There's Grosjean, I think. And there's Jenson Button, who's blown an engine. Well, that should give you a clue as to what engine modes I've been running. So out of the race and still without points. Now the Vettel should be in a net lead once Perez, Bottas and Ricciardo make their second pit stops. It'll be interesting to see what Perez can do in the final stint, as Button looks for somewhere to park. And he chooses the exit of the Dunlop hairpin, and petulantly knocks his front wing off. Into the pits comes Perez at 4.7 seconds. That was very good. Now then, where's Perez going to rejoin? It's going to be close with Hamilton, I think. Was that Vettel coming through? Yes, it was. And here comes Hamilton. Is Perez going to rejoin in front or behind? Just in front, so Perez hangs on to second position. This is Hamilton's best opportunity now to try and get ahead, because on younger tyres I should expect Perez to pull away a little bit. Rounding the Ford chicane. Are we going to see Perez pull away a bit, or is Hamilton going to use slipstream to his advantage? Who knows? The Kajera in the hands of Hamilton is I would say is a better car than an Exolite. But through the Schumacher-esque goes Perez and Hamilton. There's Rosberg lurking in the background. And then through the Ford chicane. No, that's the bit curve. What am I on about? Now in the slipstream of Perez is Lewis Hamilton. Is he going to do something about it going into the Vidal chicane? Perez in the middle. Hamilton up the inside. And Perez trying to hang on the side-by-side going into the Coca-Cola curve, and now Rosberg. Hamilton has got the position, so up into second position goes Lewis Hamilton. Now Perez is in the slipstream. Is he going to do something about it? Hamilton weaving slightly. But it looks like Hamilton is going to hold on for now. This could be a three-way scrap for second position, depending on what Rosberg can do. Meanwhile, we've got Grosjean in 5th position, Ricciardo 6th, Bottas 7th, and Robert Kubica. Haven't seen much of him this race, but he currently sits in 8th for the Andrew F1 Megatron, the customer Megatron, and in the manufacturer's hands, it is currently leading, with 17 laps to go. So Perez is now fighting back, can't do it up into that corner. The exit of the bit curve as Magnussen makes his second pit stop. Briefly in 11th, but will drop back down the order. So here comes Perez. Is he going to choose? He's choosing the outside. Now he's going to choose the inside. Is locked up a bit. Contact and spin goes Perez, and bouncing over the grass goes Hamilton. Rosberg is in second as Hamilton is stranded, sort of. Now he's rejoined, but Perez ultimately takes a position off of him. But not second, because that is with Rosberg. So that's going to be something to discuss afterwards. That's cost Hamilton about 7-8 seconds. Perez considerably less than that. Now Vettel's in an absolute gang of traffic as we go into the final lap. It's Magnussen in front, and I think it's Maldonado in front of him, and then Raikkonen. So Vettel is on his final lap as Raikkonen defends from Maldonado. Better be careful because Magnussen's lurking up as well. Now, and Rosberg's only 2.3 seconds behind, but Rosberg has got a Mitchell in front. Hard to tell if it's Hülkenberg or Al-Jaswari. Could be one of the two. So Rosberg needs to clear this Mitchell pretty quickly if he's going to stand any chance going into the Vidal. But he's definitely closing. Both drivers looking for their second win of the season. Rosberg's coming in Sepang, and Vettel's coming in the previous race in China. Now then, just 4 more corners to go. Vettel is gonna lap Magnussen at some point. There's Magnussen trying to get out of the way, but not exactly doing the great job. And now Magnussen's balking Rosberg. Look at that. Now that's gonna be another talking point after the race, which is going to happen after this final corner. Taking his second win in a row is Sebastian Vettel for Shake and Bake. Rosberg will come home second, but I suspect Willows will be a bit unhappy about the traffic late in the race, because that was a lot. Perez is going to come home a superb third. Let's call it that. Very good race for him. Lewis Hamilton fourth. After that incident with Sergio Perez, only 6 seconds behind Vettel in the end, so that traffic really holding up the leaders. Grosjean, another superb result for himself and Pedersen, 5th position. 2 shake and bakes in the top 6. Daniel Ricciardo, responsible for that 6th position. And completing the points is Valtteri Bottas and Robert Kubica. More points for the two. And there you can see some of the other results. Who got fastest lap in the end? Intrigued to find out. I suspect it's probably Alonso, who had more pit stops than most of the field. And there you can see Kimi Raikkonen down in 13th, not a good race for him. Indeed it was Fernando Alonso who set the fastest lap, but 17th position, that is not going to do his championship much good. And there you can see some of the other retirements. We saw what happened to Buemi and Di Resta and indeed Button. We didn't see Felipe Massa's loose wheel though, so that's unfortunate for the Andrew F1. And in terms of development, Climax not having a good development at this race, only 2 out of 4 finishes. Same could be said for Judd and the FJR outfit. Only 50% of their cars finishing. Magnussen was on softs, so I got that one wrong. Quick look at the championship, it should still be Sebastian Vettel leading. It is not. Still Nico Rosberg leading by 2 points, so the gap closes between himself and Sebastian Vettel now. Sir Lewis Hamilton third in the championship on 30 points, so very close between those three, and Roman Grosjean fourth in the championship. Good to see Pedersen up there. Valtteri Bottas slips down to 5th, although he did score 2 points. So that moves him solidly ahead of Raikkonen now, who sits 6th in the championship. And it's Shake and Bake who now lead the Constructors' Championship by a single point from Willows, and a further 7 from Gajera. It's Exolite who sit 4th in the championship thanks to Sergio Perez's brilliant performance. Pedersen 5th ahead of GRM, so I believe Pedersen have jumped GRM there. Mitchell, Andrew F1, FJR and Tornado all have points, and Horizon yet to score. So we shall move on from the Nürburgring to a race which hasn't been on the FF1M calendar for quite a while, 1999 I believe. it's the Portuguese Grand Prix at Estoril. We shall see you then.